Well, that smell is, you know, oh, it's absolutely fantastic. And other people, you can see them sort of waiting till they get out of here because it's pungent. We'll call it pungent. Okay, it stinks. And of course, today with both doors being shut, it kind of holds the smell in. Now, I must admit, I quite like the smell. I don't like hoppy beers, but I love the smell of hops. It's just one of those really weird things. And what the hops are the flower or the cone of the hop plant. Now, some of you may have seen hops growing, but they don't kind of grow around here. It's a little bit usually cold and damp for them. But if you go down to Kent, if you go to parts of Herefordshire and Worcestershire, you'll see the hop fields. And if you go down in winter, you'll probably be puzzled by the fact there appears to be fields full of telegraph poles. And these poles are up and the wires are strung between them. The little plants are planted in the spring and then they grow up like vines all through the summer. And in the autumn they're harvested off and end up in breweries, among other places. The traditional way of harvest was also always for people from the cities, if you like, near those areas, to go down and have sort of a working holiday. So from Kent they used to go down from East London, from sort of Herefordshire, you can imagine Worcestershire, you've got that sort of bit of conurbation, if you like. They used to go out into the countryside and pick hops, and that still occurs today, not in the same numbers as that it did, but it's still, quite a few hops are still hand-picked. Quite a lot are also just machine-picked, whipped off with a tractor and sorted that way. But we still get people in quite regularly, oh, I used to go hop picking, or, you know, oh, there's still hop pick where I live. So it's sort of a real tradition for these areas. They're added to the beer for their character, the aroma, the bitterness that they give to the beer as well. There's different hops, some are very bitter in, some are very aromatic, and there's a whole load in between. So again, it's the brewer's art to select the right ones that are going to go together to give a particular flavour in each of the beers. Nowadays, with the exception of one or two microbreweries that are doing true ales, not real ales, true ales, every beer that you have has hops in it. And we're talking real ales, we're talking that other stuff that's produced, mass-produced in packets. No, it isn't mass-produced in packets, but you know what I mean. Large sort of conglomerate breweries. Stouts, lagers, they've all got hops in. But if you go back a few hundred years, you'll find English beers certainly didn't have hops in them. They would be flavoured with all kinds of herbs. Thyme and rosemary, bog myrtle. If anybody's done any fell walking, you find bog myrtle in the bogs. It's quite an aromatic herb, nicely aromatic, unlike the bog itself. Willow bark was used, heather was used. All kinds of things were boiled up, like we do in the boiling copper with the hops, but those herbs were boiled then. The reason for that was, if you drink the wort as it comes out of the mashed tun, it's very, very sweet. Malt sugar is really sweet. And if you're drinking something to refresh you as a thirst-quenching drink, if it's sweet, it's not going to do the job. So you need to take that sweetness away, make it a bit more bitter. So, because that's what the people were doing, putting all these herbs in to make the drink a little bit more refreshing, less sweet. On the continent, they were using hops. The hops do a better job. They had the right idea, because the English beers were still a bit on the sweet side. And when you look back at old recipes, and we're talking very old recipes, you'll find there were 5 to 6% alcohol by volume, thereabouts. Now you're probably all thinking, oh, what's the problem? That's all you had to drink. So you weren't going to get much work done if you were drinking sort of 6 to 8 pints of Snecklifter a day, where you're going to be horizontal. So the beers were diluted into what was called small beer for children and ladies. But a lot of places had a beer allowance, you know, big estates, if you like, monasteries where people were working, and that would be around 8 pints. So I'm not quite sure what they did. They must have just drunk it all at night and then slept really soundly until the next day or something like that. The continental beers, on the other hand, weren't as strong by any means, so there's something going on there. The strong beers keep better. We know why they were strong. They didn't have fridges in medieval times, so they needed the beers fairly strong to keep them. But it wasn't much different on the continent. You know, in fact, it was hotter in places. Why did their beers keep longer? We know now these are antibacterial. So as well as making the beers more acceptable, more refreshing to drink, they help the beers keep. They're a natural preservative to add to the brew. So hops were introduced to this country, and gradually they came into use. Gradually people started growing and developed their own hops, and so things went on. And nowadays, as I say, virtually everything has hops in it, but 1 or 2 micros are starting to do true ales which don't have hops in, and they're flavouring them with the old-fashioned herbs. So it'll be interesting. I haven't tried one yet, but it will be interesting. The amount of hops you use obviously varies beer to beer, but for that 150 barrel brew, around about 50 kilos of hops. So it's actually a very small amount. And it will be a mixture. It'll be a mixture of 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 different varieties. Now we have 3 varieties of hops here. You're going to say, well, there's 5 beers. 2 lots of Fuggles, 2 lots of Goldings, 1 lot of Challenger. But we have 3 or 4 other varieties that we use as well, especially in the seasonal beers, so we've got plenty of choice. We always use whole corn hops. The pellets are generally made with what are called American hops. Nothing against the Americans, but American hops are very bitter. So they just don't work for the aromatic beers that we're making. Okay. Any questions before we move on? No?
I've got one.
Yeah.
What's the difference between types?
Just flavour really. I mean, they look exactly the same. They'll look this taste the same more or less to us. Just if we tried them, but you get different types of apples. Yeah. You might get your Golden Delicious and your Royal Gala and your Braebury or something like that, and they all do taste different. They're all an apple, all obviously an apple, but the tastes are different. So Goldings are very, what we call aromatic. They're quite flowery and scenty in the flavour that they give, whereas the Challenger hops are a little bit sharper and more bitter, and the Fuggles somewhere in between. So that's where the difference is, just purely in what they add to the beer, whether it's aromatic or whether it's bitter or whether it's flowery. Okay, right.